This is Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Mem. We're holding in the bottom of Lamid Tes Amid Beis, a little bit high up on the Amid at the new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, once again, they called learning to be an incredible schos for Shlema for Gabriel Simcha Ben Miriam Ahuva B'Seich Sha'ar Chayle Yisrael. We're continuing learning different items of Goyim, particularly Avodah Zarah, that on the flip side, that are mutter ba'achila. Says the Mishnah, Velu mutter ba'achira, the following is mutter to eat. Chalav shechal v'yakom, but, important words, Yisrael ro'yehoy, a yid sees him milking it, which right away shows us that the din of Chal Yisrael is different than other dinim. It's a din of re'iyah, it's a din of a Jew watching the milking process. Number two, advash and honey v'aduvd v'ha grape clusters, even though they are still dripping. Ein bahem misham hechsher mashke are not considered prepared for liquids with regard to dini tuma. Ukvashim, preservatives, shein dark unless it's tachan yain b'chaymeitz. It's not normal to put wine in vinegar. V'tarish in a trufa, taris that's not chopped up. V'tzir and brine, shish b'daga is fish. V'ala shal chilsis, and a leaf of chelsis. Zete gluskiois ham gulgalin, cakes of softened olives. Rav Yesi Omer hashlachim ar asurim. Says Rav Yesi, if we have ones that the pits are ready to fall out, then they're aser. Hachagavim, grasshoppers aboim mean haslula asurin. Grasshoppers, they come from the basket or aser, but mina hefsek, come from storage, are going to be mutter. V'chein l'truma, and of course, the Gemara is going to discuss exactly what is going on over here. So we start with the din of chalav. Says the Gemara, and I'll bring your raya. If someone is sitting, someone could sit a yid next to the eder, the flock, the herd of a guy, and the guy can milk for him, and who maybe could bring that type of milk, and there's no problem. Says eat like a davar tamei b'edroi. If the only thing in the flock is kosher animals, it's all cows. Pshita, of course, it's kosher. But if I cared, there's a davar tamei, amai, then why is it kosher? So says the Gemara, leilan di davar tamei. V'chikai chazi lei. V'chiyasiv, excuse me, v'chikai chazi lei. And the reason why it's kosher is because he sees the guy milking it. V'chiyasiv lei chazi lei. When he's sitting, he can't see it. So ma'u the team of the havmin would be given the yasiv lei chazi. Since he's sitting, he doesn't really see the whole milking process. So we should be worried. Maybe the guy is going to mix in not kosher milk. Kamash Malon, Kim the Chikai, Chazile, Artuti, Mirtas, V'lo Me'ariv, because he's sitting there, the guy is afraid, there's a mirsas of the yid, and therefore, V'lo Me'ariv Lei, the guy is not going to mix in the non-kosher milk. And we continue with the next case of the Mishnah about Dvash and honey. He says more Dvash, what's the concern? If the concern is to mix in something not kosher, Mr. Sorry, they'll make the honey spoil. You can eat it raw, and we already saw that anything can be eaten raw. Doesn't have an issue if a guy cooks it. If it's because of the utensils of the guy, and that's the reason why honey is going to be mutter. Correct. Gemara over a mini. We're 5 lines to the bottom. Ask the Gemara, if someone harvests clusters for the gas for the wine press, Shamay Omer says Shamay Hochshar, it is susceptible to Mimkabel Toma. Hilomer Lo Hochshar. Boy, Hillel Shamay, but Hillel is maskim. Hasam Kabayi Le Mashke. Hachal Kabayi. Excuse me. Boy, Hillel Shamay. And that's a machlek used to regard to Toma. But with regard to Shabbos, Hillel is masking to Shammai. So for Ekti Gemara, so what does our Mishnah say that it's not Chulsha Likabel Toma? Explains the Gemara, Hasam Kabayla Lemashke. That case is different than our case. Over there, you need the grapes Lemashke, and that's why Hillel's Maidil Shammai. Whereas by us, look at the mashke, that's the reason why they would not be hokshar lekabel tuma. Tarish and trufa, 3 lines on the bottom. Taris shene trufa, or the tzir, the brine that has kilbis fish in it. Tanarabon, az tarish and trufa. What is this item? Bechol sharoish v'shidroi kol. Excuse me. Sharoish v'shidroi nikar. The head and the spine are discernible. That's a case of tarish she'ene trufa. It's not minced. It's not cut up. Excuse me. Kol sharoish v'shidroi nikar. What's the case of sear with fish? Kol she kilvas achas. Oishel shtei kilvayos says 1 kilvis or 2 kilvis as we turn over to Daf Mem, which are, what are the kilvis doing? They are shoitetes boy. They are swimming in it. So this is the different type of food entities. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Hashtag kilvis achas amrit shari. The classical kasha, if it has 1 kilvis, it's mutter. Shtei kilvayos mi bayi. Why does it teach this case of 2? Explains the Gemara like kasha, kan bivisuchais, kan bistumais. 2 different cases. One is with an open barrel of brine, and therefore 1 single fish is not going to be enough because maybe it fell from the outside. Kan bistumais, a closed barrel of brine, and therefore 1 fish, 1 kilbis fish will be enough to prove that it is kosher. Itmar Rav Huna Amar Ashdei Roish v'Shidrei Nikar. Rav Nachman Amar Oy Roish Oy Shidra. So machlek is how much has to be recognizable for the kashrus of this fish dish. So Maser Rav Bar Chama ubedagim keishloi snabir v'kaskesas. When it comes to fish, says the Mishnah, has to have fins and scales. So for the Gemara, if also we just said either a Rosh or a Shidra is a definitive sign, the Mishnah should have listed that. Answers the Gemara, Amar Abaye Kitanya. What was that Mishnah referring to? Is Ba'ara ube pulmada. That Mishnah is referring to Ara and pulmada. What are those type of fish? The Damu Rishayu, the Tameim. The heads are similar to non-kosher fish, and therefore you need to go down to the fins and scales. But in our case, the head by itself could be a defining factor that you know it is a kosher fish. Amrav Yudimishvei Deula Machlekes is what? Letabel b'tziron, to dip in brine. Aval begufan, divrei hakol. It's going to be also to eat the fish itself until what? Ashtei roish v'shidra nikra, until you can actually discern and know what type of fish it is. Amar Rav Zera, Mareish Havamatzvilana b'tziron. Says Rav Zera, originally I would dip the food in the brine of the Avodah Zarah, the Taris. And he would originally dip, even though there's only 1 sign, either a Rosh or a Sheder, the head of the spine. But then, it says, Rav Zera, Kiv the Shaman Allah, the Amar Rav Yehuda, I heard this member of Mishrei De'ula, Machlekes L'Tabel, B'tzira, and that's where the whole Machlekes is. However, when it comes, Avol Begufa, when it comes to eating the fish itself, they're very called Aser. Actually, Rosh Hashidah, Nekra, B'tziran, Nami, Loi Mitablina. So then he was Machmer, and he wouldn't even dip into it unless it had the Rosh and the Sheder that was recognizable. So says the Gemara, what Lamaisa is the Psak Halacha? Amar Rabba Be'elchas Asher Reish Shidrai Nikar Shakol Achas V'Achas. Teaches Rabba the Halacha Lamaisa is going to be Aser till each and every one of the Reish of the fish is going to be recognizable. Frak the Gemara, 1 second. Meisvei Chatichois Shishben Simin Beimekula Beimixas. We have pieces of fish that have 1 siman, 1 simani kashas. Whether it is bekulan and all of them, whether it is b'miksasan and some of them, says the Braisa, va'afilu, and even be'echad, mimeya, even 1 out of 100. What's the halacha? Kulamu tarais. Umaisa, there's a story, teaches the Braisa, va'akom echad she'evi garav shel chatichais. There's a story with a guy who brought a barrel of fish. V'nimsa siman ba'achas, and there was 1 siman. Ve'eter hashebag, it's like Rav Kuloi. Rav Shimon Gamliel says the entire ground, the entire barrel is mutter. So what do we see? We see not like we just said, not like Rav Papa just taught us halacha was that you don't need a simon on each and every one. 1 in the barrel is enough. Explains the Gemara. Rav Papa explains Rav Papa kishetachatichais shavais. Rav Papa was referring to where the pieces form into 1 fish. That's where Rashbag said 1 simon is going to be enough. But if they're all separate pieces of fish, each one would need a siman. Ask the Gemara, Yachi, my remember what's the Chiddush? Explains the Gemara, you know what the Chiddush is? I would have thought, I would have thought maybe it just happened to happen, the pieces fit together. But maybe they're still from different fish. So maybe the halach of Rabbav would still apply that you need a siman on each and every one. Kamash Malon, then in that case, you would not. The Gemara continues with a story. 12 lines from the wide lines. The first one line is Dilma. Hahu arba, there was a boat, disachanta, of Sachanta, that what asil sichra, kid sichra. Nothing Ravuna Bar China v'chazabe kilfi v'sharya. Ravuna Bar China went out and saw scales and said it was Sharya's mutter. Amli Rava Omika the Shari Kagamna. Can you say such cases? Mutter ba'asal kilfi in a place in which scales are common. Nafak Shipura, the Rava Vaser. So they went out and they started announcing that Rava says all the fish is aser. Shipuri the Ravuna Bar China v'shari. But the announcers, Ravuna Bar China, went out and then he said it was mutter. So what is the machlek? So Rav Yermel, I'll tell you what the machlek is. It's midifti l'didi Amar li Rav Papi explained. Kishari Ravuna Bar China is what? Bitziran. It's in the brine. That will be gufan. But the fish themselves, loy. Amar Rav Ashi l'didi Amar li Rav Papa. No, to me, Kishari Ravuna Bar China will be gufan. Va'ana lo misar asirna. It's explained to me they're really being making the fish themselves. And I didn't say it was aser. The Kamar li Rav Papa, because Rav Papa said to me that Ravuna Bar China was mekel. V'loi misha sharina. But as well, I didn't say to be mekel. Why? So we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. One saying mutter, one saying it's aser. And therefore I did not say, I did not say either. Says the Gemara, okay, another story going back to the tzir, the brine of the fish, and how we could figure out the simane kashas. Yosef Rav Chena bar Yidi Kami the Ravada Barav on the third wide line. Yosef Ikamar, they were sitting and saying, Akam Shevi Areva Maleo Chaviyos. A guy brings a small boat filled with chaviyos, of barrels of tzir, of brine. Vinim says, and within all these barrels, kilbus kachas mehem psuch avas mehem. They found one kilbus, one fish, in all of the barrels. So says what's the din? Psuchais if the barrels were open, kula mutares. Stubos if they're closed. He mutares for kula nasuris. Amar leim nalacha. How do you know this din? How do you know the differentiation? Mitlasa Kraishimili explains. You know why? Three not psukim, but equivalents of three psukim. What's equivalents of three psukim? Mirav, Ushmuel, Virav, Yoicha, none. And from here, the Gemara continues into other products, other fish products, and their kashas. Amar Rabuna Amarav, Kirvei Dagim, you have the fish innards, Ubaran, and other parts of the fish. Eini kachin ella min amomcha. You have to buy from momcha. Rav Ula le Rav Dustoi. So Ula asks Rav Dustoi de Minbiri the following kasha. The fact that he said to purchase them from a momcha mechlal to dag tamei islay ubar. It sounds like this ubarin surely is translated as row. It sounds like that dag tamei has this item, and that's the reason why it could only be bought from a mamcha. Now the roe, this uber, is the eggs inside, maybe a form of caviar inside the fish. Frakti Mara, but is that true? Many dagtami mashritz dagtahar matil beitzim. Says the Mara, 1 second. The dagtame mashritz gives off children straight alive, and a dagtahar matil beitzim. So says the Gemara, sounds like any dog tameh doesn't produce beitzim bechlal. So what's the reason that I have to purchase min hamomcha? Explains the Gemara, sami mikan ubarin. So the Stay of Biri explains, you got to erase the word ubarim. He never asked about the akasha, because you're right, a dog tameh does not actually make the eggs. Amli Rav Zeir lotis tummy. Says Rav Zeir, no, don't erase it. Tavayo matili beitzim, they both make eggs. Different ways of producing the eggs in the fish. Says the Gemara, but if that is true, lamali mumchim, what does the mumcha do for me? Livdik b'simanim, just check the fish. Tetanya, kisimane beitim kach simani dagim. It's the same simanim. Simani dagim salkadaitach, says the Gemara. Simani dagim is what? Snabber v'kas kases. So you can't have such simanim on the beitim. Ella ksevbu. Ella kisimanim beitim, says the Gemara. It's similar. Kach simane oivre dagim. Veilu hein simani beitim. What are the simanim? Kol she'kudres v'golglos roisha echad kad, says the Gemara. You know what the simanim are? It narrows and it's round. Roisha echad kad, one end is flat. Roisha echad chad, one end is pointed. Then it's the ha'ira. Beis roisha echad and beis roisha kad, and both are flat or both are pointed. Tameya chalmoin mibachotz. If it has the chalmoin, the white part of the egg on the outside, v'chalmoin, and the yellow part of the egg mibifnim tar. Chalmoin v'chalmoin chalmoin the chalmoin v'chalmoin mu'ravin zebazeh zui beitzas asharetz. That's a beitza of asharetz. So what do we see? We see that you can tell from the egg itself whether it came from a kosher fish. So frakti Gemara, what's the reason you have to buy it from a mumcha? Just check the egg itself. Amar Rav on the last line. Kisheni muchu. We're talking about the eggs have dissolved, and that's why you have to buy it from a mumcha. Rav Destaid ben Biri, Damar Sami Mekana Obre, and according to Rav Destaid ben Biri, that said, erase from this price ubarin. How does he learn? Explains the Gemara as we turn over to Memon Beis. But Tanya asked the Gemara, Kisi mani beitikachsi mani over a dogim. Says the Gemara, no, lav teruti mitaretis l'cha. Kach. I'll explain to you as follows. Kach simani kirvei dagim ve'echem mishachas b'simani kirvei dagim she'ekad v'chan mishachas b'shilu chufa. Says the Gemara, how do we find the simanim of the inners of the fish? She'ekad v'chad, there's flat and pointed. Mishachas la b'shil pucha. We find it in the bladder of the fish, and that's where it has the shape of the fish's eggs. That's what simani meibiri was referring to. The Gemara continues, and therefore, so we just said, so these items, whether it's because they're dissolved, whether it's because you can't tell whether they have the appropriate simanim, you have to buy it from a mumcha. So says the Gemara, what if there is no mumcha? Amar Rav Yehuda, Kivan Damar Ani Melacht. Kivan Damar, says Rav Yehuda 6 lines down. Ani Melachtim. If the seller who's not an expert says, I was one that salted the fish, they were kosher fish, and so those fish that the eggs came from, then mutarim. Nachman Amar Che Amar Elu Dagim Ve'elu Kirveim. You say these are the fish and these are the innards of the fish. Uri le Rav Yehuda la'ada dayala Kivam Damar Nemalachtim mutarim. He said like the first sheet. If he says he was one that salted it, that will be enough. We continue 10 lines down with the next case of the Mishnah of Allah Shal Chilsas to leave of the Chilsas. Says Gemara Pshita. Of course, it's mutter. Why would we think it's also? And it's kortan sheboy. The grains that come together with the leaf. I would have thought you have to hear that maybe a guy came and mixed grains that were cut with a not kosher knife. The reason why it's kosher is because it the grain slipped off the leaf, and that's the reason why you don't have to be concerned. Cakes of softened olives, even though they're very soft, so what's the concern? Maybe the guy put wine into the olives. Chiddush is that no, they're soft. Why? Because the oil of the olives themselves. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yasi Amar Shlachan Asurin. Says Rav Yasi, the pits that fall out are going to be aser. If you hold the olive in your hand, then the pit slips out on its own. Now we go into different types of grasshoppers. Grasshoppers, husk of caper berries, vakap lutiyos, and leeks haba in minaoitz or minaheftek minasvina. They come from storage, the stockpile of the boat. Mutarin, hanimkarim bekataloizel of nechanvani, that are sold in front of the storekeeper. Then aser. Why? Because the storekeeper, they pour wine on it. The wine, the apple wine, apple cider of a guy, Ha'abayim and Oitzim and Heftik and Aslula is going to be mutarim, but I never come with Kataluz, Asim Neshuravim by Yain. So Tana Rabbanan quotes a Braisa. Pa'amachas Chosh Rebbe Me'ov. One time, Rebbe had a stomach problem. Amar Kulam Ish Adam Sheyodea Yain Tapuchim Shel Akam Asar. Does anyone knows apple cider of a guy, the wine of the cider is a mutter Asar. Amal Lefana Rav Yishmael Rav Yosi Pa'amachas Chosh Abba B'Me'ov. My father has something issue. Vevelo Yain Tapuchim Shel Akam Shel Ayin Shana, 70-year-old apple cider of a guy. V'shasad, he drank him in his shop and he got better. Amalai Kol Kachai B'Yadcha. Vata B'Sarani, you knew the halacha, and you're painting me, you didn't tell me. Badku Matu Akam Echad Shayil Shalosh Meyos Karvei Yayin, 300 barrels of wine Shel Tapuchim Shel Ayin Shana. V'shasa v'nisrapa, and he got healed. Amar Baruch HaMakayim Shemasar Leilam Shemrim. Blessed is Hashem who handed this world over to his guardians, and Hashem put into the minds of man that you should store things that will end up being cures. He said Baruch Hashem over the medicine that he had, and people realized the medicinal properties of the apple cider. And now we wrap up the parak. V'chein l'tshuma, my v'chein l'tshuma for Gemara. What does that mean? Amar Rav Sheizer v'chein l'kayin achash elimkar tshuma l'shem chulin, a kayin that's suspected to sell tshuma as chulin l'fanav uda aser. If it's in front of him, it's aser. Avobam and aitim and hafting when aslulis mutter artute mirsis. Why? Going full circle, because it's a mirsis of Shami b'Rabbanim of Sidlei Minei. So the Rabbanim are going to hear that he's playing games, and they're going to not going to buy any of his stuff, and therefore the mirsis makes him mutter. Hadron aloch ein mamidin. To continue doing a chazara b'siyata dishmaya.